here, who is the project manager thus far on, I'm sorry. Wow, I'm getting to the
Lance, may I interrupt you? Mr. Trainee has it.
One quick question.
Sure.
What was the cost in this study?
Well, the total cost to the, for the contractor,
Right.
3 years, $150,000 a year, I believe, it's 1 year with 2 optional years as well.
So it's right now it's at $150,000?
$150,000 was the total appropriated for this.
Thank you.
contract
For just
one
one,
year.
for 1 year.
Go ahead, Lance.
And if it turns out that we're off at all, we'll get right back.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and introduce David, and David Hutchison's principal for Excipio Consulting.
Thank you for your time today. Trying to keep this moving. I know we have a very short timeline to go through. We've given you a brief summary of our organization, other firms we've done work for that's included. It's a white piece of paper in this place on top of the slide deck, so I won't spend any time with that. So the project that we were asked to go through had 4 distinct tasks with it. Assessing the current state, determining an appropriate future state, opportunities to minimize operational costs, and to look at the organizational structure going forward to find other areas for efficiency. So the thing that's probably important to note is not all of the Muni's agencies were included in the scope. The scope we were asked to cover involved these 5 agencies here. So there are other larger agencies that were not included within the scope. Any questions?
Was GIS included in this?
GIS, as far as these 5 agencies go. So for example, ALU and MLMP were not within the scope of the study.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there are a lot of strengths that are already going on within the organization today. You already have a lot of the right direction, right ideas. You already have a framework that exists for centralization. There's a lot of shared services that already exist today. You already have chargeback models that are in place. And most of the agencies follow the ITD standards that are out there. Probably one of the things that's noteworthy is the customer service focus. We do a lot of work in public sector, and a lot of times that customer service just isn't there. And even with the day-to-day people that are supporting PCs, doing print jobs, working the help desk, et cetera, I would say you have a much above average customer service focus of those people. They're really concerned in anything that goes on is what does that do to my customers and the quality of service. So I would say you guys are quite a bit above average from that perspective. You have many of the right initiatives in play. The ERP and the mainframe is a great example. There's a lot of risk associated with the current system that you have. It's outdated. It's got a lot of customized code. It can't be updated anymore. The mainframe's an expensive platform to be running on versus other technologies today. So that's one we definitely feel is a strong play for you guys. Consolidation of the data center, server virtualization, and you've already made numerous attempts at cost reductions through the existing processes and staff that you have today. So those are a lot of things that are going right. Questions with this slide? Yes, sir.
I don't see anything in there about the cloud. Is that, are you going to address that?
Cloud's an interesting, it's a sourcing alternative, okay? It's not really a solution, and that's one thing that's hard for people to wrap around today, because everything you see is cloud, 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 cloud. All that, it's just kind of really a rebranding of having external services.
It's an alternative to a mainframe, though, right?
Absolutely, it could be. But you have to also realize, too, when you go to a cloud service, the way they make money is by sharing and leveraging that infrastructure across multiple clients. If you were actually and a lot of people, which can create some security issues, right? So if you really had a dedicated environment in the cloud of the similar configuration that you run today, it should actually be a little more expensive because most of those companies are in it to make a profit, whereas you're not doing that today. So.
Mr. Trainee.
If you're in the cloud, you're just storing on somebody's server somewhere else. Nothing about not being able to control your own data, because once it's pushed out there, it's stored somewhere else. Versus having a mainframe, you store yourself.
Actually, a lot of big companies have been looking at doing that. Most of the contracts are written in a form that you are still control your data. We've seen companies that have pushed out to the cloud, tried to use it, decide they didn't like it, and they just get their data back and they just continue the process. So it really is more of a risk reward versus cost efficiency that you have to look at and make a decision. It's just another sourcing alternative. Do you do it internally? Do you outsource it to a third party, or do you look at doing cloud? So
Has there been no security problems though, having a cloud storage on it?
A lot of the vendors have come up with some really solid, great solutions for that. I mean, they've actually been certified by like the U.S. Department of Defense. So, in my opinion, if you could meet the DoD requirements, I would expect they would pass your security course.
Thank you.
Lance, did you have a question?
No, no,
Okay. All right. Opportunities. There are some areas that you can look at, you know, and part of it a lot of it has to do with staffing. There's some recommended organizational changes that we're talking about. Overall, the staffing is more than adequate to meet the current needs of the business as it runs today. However, there are some key roles that aren't there that you would typically see in an organization of your size. And I won't bore you with the abbreviations, but it has to do around project management. That has to do around systems analysts that understand how the business is run, how the workflows are run, how those integrate into IT, how you can, instead of having 6 different systems that all do, say, something like document management. Instead of having 6 different systems, how could the municipality move to a single system at those times? That's what a lot of those types of roles we cover. But probably also another one is the last one, the SO, security officer. For an organization of your size, you really should have somebody dedicated in that role from a security perspective. So, as an expert there. Another thing is working with HR to identify title discrepancies, benefits, salary. We see this in public sector quite a bit, and what it usually comes down to is somebody's a valued employee, they've been around a while, they've been in a desktop role, they've maxed out their range, but they don't want to lose them, and so they'll give them a little bit different title framework, which then allows them to enter a different pay grade and things like that. We did find some discrepancies within the various organizations where people have titles, roles that really don't match what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And the other side of that too is you also have some other roles where versus the market, the pay scales are out of whack. Some are too high, some are way too low. And that's provided in pretty good detail in the document. So just some things to work on with that. Okay, questions with this? Okay. Culture change is another one that's going to be a little bit of an obstacle that you're going to have to overcome. A lot of it has to do with ownership control issues. We hear this a lot in working with organizations. Everybody thinks their agency is unique. Okay, you guys are not different from that. Everybody thinks that their business, their systems, everything is unique. The answer is typically about 80% of IT is very similar across all organizations. You still have networking, you still have PCs, you still have office productivity suites, all those other types of things. There are business line applications that are unique. Okay, so there might be something specific for 911 or something specific for HR or something, but 80% of what they run can still be a shared capability. So they're from that perspective, some of that paradigm, some of that you're going to have to overcome that hurdle a little bit to work more collaboratively towards the common goal. So disaster recovery is something today there really isn't a great DR solution within any of the agencies. Centralization and standardization, which is one of the recommendations out of this, will greatly simplify and reduce the cost to come up with your DR solutions going forward. So if everybody's running on the same platforms and you've got virtual servers and you've eliminated all the different models, et cetera, it will make creating that DR capability much less costly to the municipality as a whole. So, this one.
Backup outside the municipality, out of state or out of?
Most of the agencies back up either, almost all of them do back up to disk and then to tape. And then the tape but the tape doesn't, most of the tape doesn't, I don't believe, I don't think the tape leaves Anchorage, it all stays here. So if you had a regional disaster, even though you got data backed up, you still have an issue, you may not be able
I
to.
remember I was on the board, you got electric, they mirrored everything out of state. and
Right.
Alternative, some commercial.
Yeah, we actually did the analysis with that to help them with this stuff. Any other questions? Okay. Some of the other challenges that you have, there's just too many projects, okay? Given the size staff that you have, just for the 5 agencies that were in scope, you know, ITD identified like 40+ projects that were on the current roadmap. The lack of delivery is actually, in ITD's case, it was damaging their credibility at the time. We heard stories that said, you know, yeah, they're supposed to come up with this, and it was supposed to be out in this date, and now we get it, you know, here we are a year later, we still don't have a solution, you know, we're over budget, all those types of things, right? 60% of the staff is required just to do operational, day-to-day, hands-on, break-fix issues. So that, when you think of the size of the IT staff, 60% of it is just daily care and feeding, right? And many of those projects compete for the same resources. So for example, on the backup side, there's one little person from ITD that designs them, implements them, supports them, picks up all the tapes, keeps them cataloged, eliminates errors, deals with the vendors, etc. So if you suddenly have new solutions that are coming up, you're still trying to pull from the same person who can only put in so many hours a day. So that's part of the challenge that you have. And people have a habit of going to, not necessarily following a process, but if there's a go-to guy that they've had before, then they call that guy even though it may not follow the process, and because that guy always gets his job done, and so now that's a distraction for him, but, you know, I'm sure you guys understand that. So, application support, this is one that's expensive for a lot of organizations because it gets out of control. The industry has made it so easy to produce IT applications, whether you're using Access, Java, FileMaker Pro. I mean, there's a number of tools out there. It used to be you had to have a technically trained developer to develop applications. Today, that's no longer the case. You can, almost anybody, you know, secretaries, you know, managers, et cetera, can throw something together. And it's amazing how, once it's put together and they start using it, they kind of become dependent on it. And then there's problems with it. Nobody was involved in the development, or that person leaves, they don't know how to support it. It's very common that most organizations don't know how many total applications they really have out there. What really needs to happen is you need to get that inventory put in place, and when you introduce applications, they should have a set life cycle. So when you put it in place, we're going to have this application for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And then when you get a year or two before it's supposed to, the life cycle's up, you decide, are we going to replace it, are we going to retire it, those types of things. Because right now, you have, I'm willing to bet, you have a ton of applications out there that are legacy, ancient, we have to have it, but the guy who built it's not here, it's placing your organization at risk for the things you do every day. Yes, sir.
What sort of audit process has the city withstood as far as you know, auditing the record the number of copies of a specific software when you're licensed for software? Is that something?
That can tie into it as well. So, yeah, because a lot of times we see there was a rather large state organization that had an audit here recently, and they thought they were in great shape, and the audit came back, and they negotiated their way out of it, but it was a multi-million-dollar licensing deficit.
I'd just like to say, we have had audits of the licenses occur since I've been on board, and there have been issues. And so we've corrected them immediately and paid the appropriate fees. But it's because it's been so distributed and not centrally controlled, it's been very difficult to stay on top of what that is.
Yeah, if your license is for a fixed number of seats on an application.
There's also an opportunity, if you consolidate your licenses, that you can negotiate better fees. And so that's directionally where we're going.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things we were asked to provide was benchmarks. So how do we stack up, versus other entities that are similar to us, et cetera. Of the 3 that are here, and we have hundreds and hundreds of clients, we actually look for matches that have similar number of employees, similar technology, similar applications, similar processes, et cetera, to find organizations to compare you against. Okay, so this isn't like we said, we took US Bank or we took state of Minnesota or something. These are actual organizations of similar size. So in general, there is, and if you look at each one of these, And the details in the report, so I won't go through a lot of that. But you can see that there's definite benchmarks and metrics here that tell you that in some cases you are high. So the first one, let's just take PC computing, for example. The normal range, the gray column is kind of the normal range that we see with clients. And then you'll see what other organizations have been able to achieve, et cetera. And yours is significantly above that. Well, that doesn't really surprise me given that high touch, high customer focus. Because when we talk with the desktop support organization, to give you an example, it usually takes about 2 hours to deploy a PC. What we mean by that is when it's unboxed, they set it up, they load all the software on it, they give it to the person, plug it in, and it works. Your process today takes on average of almost 8 hours because there's a lot of time spent going, well, but I need my kid's picture as the wallpaper and I like my icons to look like this, and they literally spend a lot of time making the machine look exactly as it did before. That's not common in business practice. And unfortunately, the industry's named it a personal computer, and people think they own it, but it's a business asset. But that's part of the reason that high level of customer service is also, you're paying for it, from a cost perspective. There are other areas like the Windows Server, you're actually doing really well there. That's well within the range, even given some of the other challenges that we have. Print management is one. We see that a lot. City of Chicago had 16,000 employees, but 8,000 printers. When they were done, they got down to only 10 printers per users per printer. So there's a lot of areas that you can improve on with that. And I believe the strategy is ITV and the other agencies are going to focus on that, and we're going to come back and remeasure it in a year or so, something like that, just to see how much you guys have improved. So,
Mr. Trini, you have a question?
Just a quick question on printers. I think I read in here we've got 1,000 types of printers
yeah.
in the report. Why? Why not drop it down to 2 or 3?
Exactly.
That's-
Do we want to?
Okay, is there a plan to take this study and put into practical application line by line?
We're developing an implementation plan based on
Yes.
the results of the study.
Do you have one?
It's not done yet, but we're working on it. Yeah.
Because I'll be interested in that. Thank you. Sorry to bother you. But when you start talking about printers, when I see 1,000 out there,
Right.
trying to support them, and he has to drive the organization crazy. Thanks.
And he's moving, yeah. So in general, kind of some big points here. In general, you have a high staff cost structure, okay? And one of the things that is a disadvantage for you is the whole first make up 22%. So that automatically makes your cost of resources higher than, other organizations. We haven't seen that even with other companies. If you look at PCs, here's a great example. 13 manufacturers, 298 models. Okay? Most organizations have one desktop manufacturer, maybe 2, one laptop manufacturer, maybe 2, and then there's typically a model for each of those standards. So it would not be, so if you had a desktop, a highly mobile, high performance, and a rugged laptop type thing, you'd only have like 25 models out there being supported. So again, that makes it more expensive, more difficult to support the organization.
Mr. Trini?
Just relative to these PCs, is there a program we've got now that mirrors the same program? So when we get a new system in, you mirror what's the standard, and then we send it out to organizations, so you're not messing with every one. But there's one standard set of applications that everybody gets.
In brief, yes, there's a base set of applications that everybody has, and then there are departmental specific applications, for public safety for different parts of the organization.
So we don't have just one standard computer, like, for example, with the military, they buy more Dells, you know what to do with. For
So-
some reason, they've decided they want to do that. But does the city have different PCs, like you said, 298 models?
So there've been sometimes also the standard changes over a couple of years. We get a really great pricing on Dell versus Lenovo, that will change over time. The vast majority of those PCs are legacy, they're old, they're gonna be retired. We're really focused on really just implementing a single standard, and the hard part of that is just enforcing it when there's so much distributed procurement capability out there. But we really try to, at every opportunity, look at procurements that are going on and get in the middle if there's a problem.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you talk about PCs, is this number just desktops throughout the municipality? Or does it
Desktops,
take
laptops.
desktops and laptops? So it's taking into consideration all the pieces of equipment that's used within this municipality. But I know that there are some departments, like the fire department for one, and police, who have very specific equipment, so you really can't, you know, bring those particular pieces of equipment into this category.
But, yeah, but if you, like we talked about, a typical, like a business desktop.
Right.
And then a high performance.
Right.
And then a mobile desktop, and then a rugged, a mobile laptop and a rugged laptop.
Mhm.
So you could still define 5 or 6 criteria and then standardize within that criteria.
Right, and I'm not saying that you can't, I just wanted to make a point that there are real department-specific computer tools that are used within this
Absolutely.
municipality.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you,
not a problem.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Probably the big one here to notice is data storage. Of all the data storage that's been purchased, 65% of it is not in use. Okay, and when you total that all up across the agencies in scope, that's a lot of money. I mean, if you work it out on an annual basis, it's probably about $500,000 a year. It's currently not being utilized efficiently. So that's something that obviously would be a golden change. So, okay, any other questions on this? Okay, so the recommendations that we did make, and I'll try and just hit these briefly. Consolidating citywide IT resources, evaluating outsource or alternative sourcing opportunities, centralizing services. This one is key. If you do not do this part properly, any centralization, any standardization effort's going to fail. So with that, the first thing you have to do is work out service level agreements. So for example, I would anticipate that a fire police would have because of life safety, would have a higher service level requirement than maybe finance or HR or something like that. So you're going to have to work with each one of those departments to understand what are acceptable response times, and that'll help you figure out where you have to locate people and what skill sets you need, and those types of things. So you can't just do one blanket cover, one service covers all. You're actually going to have to spend the time to figure that out uniquely. Creating a services catalog and cost model. A service catalog is kind of like if you go look at a online or a cloud services vendor, right? You can go to their website and they say, here are the 10 services we offer, and here's the definition of each one, and here's what you get, and here's what you don't get. You need to literally do that for all the different services that you have. So even under desktop, here's the services that you provide, and here's what they cost, and those types of things. If you don't go through this exercise, part of the challenge you'll have with this is most agencies probably won't really know what it costs them today. So like when we talked about that cost per PC, most agencies probably don't really know what it costs to support a PC today. So by putting this cost model together, at least then you create a common language across everyone so that then you can compare those. And because if I'm an agency director, I'm not going to go leverage this shared model unless it's equal cost or less cost or better service than what I have today. So, and then the third thing is socializing with the agency director. We see a lot of public firms make the mistake of they just roll it out there without any discussion, without any revisions, any process involved in that before they do it, and it turns around and bites them in the process. Going through that process is kind of a very critical piece. Next is consolidating data centers. It doesn't make sense for you to have multiple centers all around the city. None of the city's data centers are better than a tier 1. Without going into the technical explanation of all that, there's four level rating system. Tier 1 is the very bottom rung. So for life safety services, we would typically see that equipment housed in what's a tier 3 center. And then your less critical stuff would be at least a tier 2. So you've got some improvements you need to make there. Operational metrics. This was interesting. We talked with the agency directors yesterday. One of the challenges they have today is they really can't show you their current successes because they don't track operational metrics. They can't show you what their costs are. They can't show you, I'll pick on ITD, with the help desk. They can't tell you really their help desk metric looks really bad because they don't get all the calls logged of all the service requests they really handle. Some of them, people get grabbed in the hallways, hey, they're here, can you fix this, those types of things. So therefore, they can't really show you all the work that they're really doing and the progress that they are making, reducing costs, et cetera, okay? So the other thing, by starting to track that type of data, is you can use it as proactive indicators. So again, picking on help desk, if you saw a pretty flat level of help desk calls, and then the calls start to climb, that's an indication that something's wrong. And now you've got data to go dig into, and you find out that, because of budget constraints, we've not replaced PCs for the last 3 years, and now the average age of our PCs are 6 and 7 years old, and now we're getting 3 times as many calls on PCs. That would be information that they could provide to you that you would then understand why you need to go replace PCs. So this is something we really talked through yesterday. Everything's going mobile. You guys all have phones, I'm sure. I mean, data is becoming more and more critical every day. And so we were kind of telling them they need to start moving this direction. So also creating expectations, delegating responsibility. Some organizations kind of have gatekeepers, people that kind of want to keep their hands in everything. If you're going to move forward, it's kind of going to have to disseminate some of that responsibility across the staff. Next steps going forward, need to consider the impact of some of the other agencies. We've got the 2 biggest up there. Obviously, if we play into the big picture and could change some of the requirements. Continue the key initiatives that you have in place today. They need to develop a plan for centralization, data center, program management, and the service catalog pricing. And then leverage the existing authority heads, to help make those things happen, keep them on task so they don't get stalemated. And then define key initiatives, ignore distractions. One of the problems we have with IT people as a whole, we like technology, okay? We like toys. It's easy to have vendors come in and do things all the time, and we get distracted with that. You really got to watch that. And again, everything that's done needs to tie back to what are key strategic initiatives that need to be accomplished. If it doesn't address one of those, then you need to ignore it. Because vendors will always come in with the latest, greatest, fastest thing to do that for you too. So, questions with this? Okay, that's it. I'll try to get through it in case we have other questions.
Quick question for you. Page 19, very bottom, under program management. I see this phrase repeated all the time. It says ITD does not have any defined programs in place at this time. That phrase seems to be running a theme throughout this entire study.
There are a lot of things that we would expect to see in an organization, and quite honestly, they're symptomatic of why you have projects that slide. Why you don't hit cost targets and why you don't hit timelines. When you don't have people that are watching that day to day, the problem you have is it's not that you don't have people in project management roles, but they're not dedicated to it. So a lot of them have part of their role as a day-to-day operational aspect. So then they go try to focus on the strategic, like the project management, and then there's, this is wrong, I gotta go help do this. And then they turn around and start to work on it again, and here's another fire. So they keep getting pulled away from the strategic, the oversight piece, to help keep the day-to-day operations functioning.
Thank you. Last question for you. You said you're going to respond to us on each of the points
Yes.
that they've raised. When do we anticipate getting that response?
A lot of time has been spent recently on the ERP
Right, I know
program,
that.
and that's been a high priority. And we're just getting through the budget process now, so my expectation would be the next 30 days. We would
Next
actually
30
have-
days?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is probably not for you, but for you, Lance, or you send whoever wants to answer. But our helpline costs are expensive, okay? And I know for a fact, no offense to any employee, but your printer doesn't work, and you call the helpline, and helpline tells you, well, did you turn it off and turn it back on? And there are a lot of calls like that. I know there were, and there probably still are, which is really costly. Is there any way to train our employees, like have a big session with our employees and train them to try and troubleshoot to some extent their issues before they make that expensive call to the helpline? Because a lot of them probably don't even realize how expensive it is, number one. And then the next question is, Can we create some kind of virtual helpline, which would probably save money? And I have a few more questions, but why don't you just address those for now? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. In terms of training people, there's a lot more that can be done. There's some solutions that we're looking at in terms of, what are the major causes of a lot of the questions the help desk is Microsoft related, the operating system, the Office tools. We're looking at getting into what's called an enterprise agreement with Microsoft. ABU has done this recently, the state has one. We're proposing it's part of our next capital budget request. That would basically provide pretty much an unlimited amount of online training for all of their tools for all of our employees at no additional cost. But really, I think part of what it gets back to is why are there so many calls is because there are 298 different PCs, and you can train somebody, but it isn't that, we can really, there's a lot in common, but when you have that broad a platform, there's so many differences that it's hard to come up with a single training program that's going to address everybody's
Of
needs.
course, but you're gonna fix that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm working on that.
And if I may, one of the things you may want to realize is when you look at that, cost per call does look expensive. But if, say, and we don't know what the numbers are about, let's say half the calls aren't being logged, well, then that would obviously change the denominator on the cost, and so maybe it's significantly less, but because the metrics aren't being tracked today, they can only report on what they actually have in the system, so.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple more questions.
Please,
Okay,
go
thank
ahead.
you. Thank you. And so when you talk about consolidation, it's really great to consolidate, to save money and make things work better, but then along comes people losing their jobs. And so I'd like to know how many unfilled positions are going to be eliminated and how many filled positions are going to be eliminated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we're still working on the consolidation plan that would cover the muni. Part of what we were in a sense waiting for was to find out more about what was happening with Title 31 and 32 and what the potential scope might look like. And so there's kind of another 6 months planning going on in which we'll be looking at those issues also. But right now, as opportunities arise, we've had unfilled positions, for example, in community development.
I can't hear you.
There's an unfilled position in community development and one in transit that are IT support positions. And so we started down the path of defining those as business analysts and bringing them into the IT organization. So we're trying to do this in a way that addresses some of the issues with minimal impact to the customer.
Listen.
I want to emphasize that the objective of this study was to determine are we really getting the most amount of value out of the money that we spend in IT throughout the enterprise. And so the goal of David coming in and looking at the organization wasn't necessarily to identify jobs that we could cut. That wasn't the objective. The goal was to look at the $16 million that we spend and see if we're getting the most value out of it. Because we recognize that in order for us to move forward as an organization and improve our business processes, IT is a key tool. So the question is do we have the right resources in the right places? Do we have too many desktop people, or should we have more business analysts? We learned we don't have enough project managers. We need a security officer. We need a chief architect. So in order for us to move forward, we really needed the right resources in place. And this study really helped us realize where our gaps were so that we can move forward with the best team possible. It wasn't about cutting.
Can I respond?
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you so much, Ms.
I
Simmons,
just want you
for
to-
your comments, but I want you to know that I never said or even thought that he was hired to figure out how many employees to get rid of. My point, I understand exactly what's happening, and it's wonderful, okay, and it's about time. But my point is, I am always concerned when employees, jobs are on the table, always. And that's it. So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. I'd like the record to show that we've been joined by Mr. Flynn, and I'd also know that the mayor joined us early on in the presentation. I didn't want to disrupt the presentation at that time. Anyone else? Any other questions? Harry.
I've been watching this community with IT for decades, I feel like. And when I was on the school board and the school district, which is a larger organization, and municipality, put its major new business system in place. The city was doing the same thing with PeopleSoft, and all kinds of red flags went up, and all kinds of people said, don't do it. They went ahead and did it, and here we are, decades later, having poured millions of dollars down the PeopleSoft hole and God knows what else. When are we going to learn to listen to each other, listen to what other people have to say? And now we've got the school district going off on its own. We wanted the school district to join us in the server, whatever you call that thing. I'm not no expert on this stuff, but they've gone off on their own. In fact, they're going out on one of the empty schools on the military base because it works out better for them. They happen to own it. It's just frustrating that the public is asking us for consolidation and to get more efficient. And we've been telling each other to get more efficient for a long time, and we're not doing. And here we are spending $150,000 to be told once again to get more efficient. So I'm just a little frustrated.
Mr. Aver.
Through the chair. We're actively working with the school district on various projects to try to build that relationship. Yesterday, I'm actually part of a procurement team that's looking at a network management system. I am now part of a team that's helping them to procure their next network management system. And as part of that process, we're also looking at
Mr. Ahern, would you speak up?
Sure.
We apparently have problems hearing you.
It's his room.
Okay.
It's not.
Maybe move closer to the.
Sure, this might help.
Yes.
So the Muni is actively working with the Anchorage School District, at the IT operational level to try to identify these areas where we can work together. I'm part of a procurement committee that's helping to select their next network management system. And part of the goal in doing that is so that we're looking at what they're doing and we're going to bring those same vendors here and meet with them so that potentially we can leverage that. And we're looking at that across the board. We're looking at it in terms of talking with them about security vendors, wireless systems. We're looking to try to put all of our stuff together and just create a single wireless network that covers the entire city operation. So we're actively going down that path.
Good. I'm glad to hear that you're reaching out because it's moved apart, come together, and moved apart over the years, and we really need to keep it together. So thank you.
I would just like to add one comment about that, Ms. Drummond. The school district has recently decided to explore an electronic time card, a new electronic time card system. We did reach out to them to indicate that they could leverage our current Kronos contract, and they have elected not to do that. So it may be an opportunity for some of you to intervene in that process if you think that there would be value.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So did they say why?
I don't know. And we negotiated a pretty good deal. It was a really good deal. So, not sure, it can only go so far.
You can remind them that you control their budget.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Is there any other presentation?
Well, we're going to do a presentation on our recommendation on the ERP system next. Are we ready to start that?
Please.
Actually, just wanted to add the Excipio study. We had not been distributing it publicly yet, but we assume now that we've sent it to the assembly, it's okay for us to post it on the city's internet site. We intend to do that immediately. Thanks.
It was great. It was so good. I thought they were,
Lucinda, the floor is yours.
Okay. We guys should
okay, do you want to, so when I mentioned
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started if everyone's ready. You just heard from David that our ERP system is in dire need of replacement. So the objective of this meeting is to share with you the work that has been done by 100 or so of the municipal employees over the past 10 months in identifying what we need in regard to a new ERP system and then going through the process of selecting one. So this is the results of the work that everyone's contributed. Our current environment, as you know, was we have a PeopleSoft system that was implemented in 1999. In 2003, the decision was made to discontinue paying the maintenance fees. As a result of that decision, there was no longer any support that was provided by PeopleSoft. The system was no longer eligible for upgrades or patches, and as a result, it just remained stagnant. That maintenance fee was $344,000 a year. So that was the savings for them in that decision. As a result, though, we have not been able to leverage any of our business processes to take advantage of new technology and new tools. The PeopleSoft operates on an old, expensive legacy mainframe system. That system costs us about just under $1 million a year, and the CAMA project resides on that old mainframe system as well. It requires, a lot of work. It's pretty archaic. It's dated. And we can't move to the virtual environment without really considering an upgrade to the ERP. CAMA stands for Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal, and it's our property tax assessment system. The current environment with PeopleSoft really places us at an operating risk because it's so old, it's unsupported. We can't upgrade and move to the latest and greatest in terms of our Windows products because it's just not compatible with this old system. There was an interfund loan that was taken out in 1999 of $9.4 million to put this PeopleSoft system in place, and it will be paid off this year. And it was an interfund loan taken from the workers' comp account. And so actually the timing is good for this because that loan will be paid off and there wouldn't be any double payment of any type of debt service in regard to the timing of this proposal. Just a quick note too, in regard to the do-nothing scenario, you'll see later on in the slide that we estimate very conservatively savings in regard to moving to the new system to be this $900,000 per year in regard to the maintenance, and then an additional $1.5 million associated with the second bullet there, which is the savings associated with business process improvement. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. The goals of our new system is we want a modern ERP that can help us really transform our business. I did a presentation to you in the fourth quarter of 2010 discussing how archaic our business processes were. We showed you a time and motion study and laid out really where we wanted to go with our plan to improve the processes. We've made process improvements to the extent that we can without having a new tool. We need a new tool. It's imperative in order for us to move forward. The functions that are in the scope of this ERP are very far-reaching in the organization. It's finance, HR, budget, procurement, grants, and project management. And then the scope of the departments that are included would be all of general government, all of our grant functions, AWW, MLP, pretty much all of our enterprises. So we are looking at one ERP solution for everyone. Our goal and our strategies in terms of moving forward was an enterprise solution. Secondly, and this is really important, no customizations. Part of the problem with PeopleSoft is we got into an environment of customizations and it made it, it's just horrible. Anyways, the way technology has developed in the past 10 years is the tier 1 ERPs are now set up in a manner where they are highly configurable. And it's easy to configure versus the old way, which was to customize. So that was one of our requirements in terms of evaluating those that proposed, is it had to be configurable to meet our business requirements, but yet use best practices. Our goal was that rather than changing the ERP to match our practices, we were going to change our business processes to best practices and match the ERP processes that come out of the box. The organization that we've selected has, implemented it in tens of thousands of organizations. They have many years of experience in terms of defining what a best practice is for public sector organizations. I think we can follow along with them, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And that was a part of our strategy going forward. We'll have more governance over the processes. As we automate them, we'll be able to automate a lot of the controls that are currently manual. Of course, the goal is to eliminate some of the administrative redundancies, streamline the processes, have a lower cost structure, automation, workflow-based, scalable, flexible. These are all typical strategies that you would deploy. Just wanted to lay it out there to make sure you understood that we've had a thoughtful process in terms of going forward. In the fourth quarter, when I talked about where we were going with our business improvement process, I had laid out a plan. And this is the plan in the top part of the slide here. And I went through that then. I don't know if you recall it. So what I was going to do today was tell you what we did relative to the plan that we had laid out. And the first thing was to really understand the business requirements. I mean, that is critical in terms of selecting an ERP system. We identified, documented, and included in the RFP 1,600 finance and budget business requirements, 1,500 HR requirements, and then 1,500 requirements from AWWU based on your decision to direct one ERP for the organization. Of the AWWU business requirements, 65 of them were in fact differentiating to them as a result of their regulatory environment. So it was really important that we get that in at the last minute, and we did. Yes.
And just a reminder why MLMP isn't included in this.
MLMP was included in the entire process. They did not submit any differentiating business requirements. They fully participated and fully support the decision that we made. And as a matter of fact, there was a representative of MLMP on the selection committee. They were very active in the process.
Just had a question. We talked a little bit about the school district earlier, but if the school district was involved, would that double the number of requirements? I'm going to be interested in what sort of cost savings that, in other words, if you were to scale up to include the school district in this process, would it double, or would there be a lot of overlap?
Well, okay, that's a good question. There are functions that reside within an ERP that are common, if you will. And those would probably be very similar to the 1,600, 1,500 here, like payroll and general ledger, kind of like the glue of your organization. But they would most likely have some very differentiating type functions, and those would need to be identified. With AWWU, there were 65. I don't know what it would be with the school district. I do know that the solution we are recommending going forward with, which is SAP and Black & Veatch, does have a module that would be school district specific. But we did not evaluate that, and that was not a part of our scope. I am aware that ASD does currently exist with a 15-year-old ERP system that they update. That in my conversation with Chad, they indicate that they are happy with it. At least that was the conversation he communicated to me some months ago when we were talking about shared services.
Thank you.
Maybe it's changed, but that's what he shared. Anyways, what we did is we looked at, in terms of managing the project, we said that there were two routes that we wanted to evaluate. One would be, what if we just upgraded PeopleSoft? What would that look like? Versus what if we went to a completely new software solution? So we ran two different RFPs. We got two proposals in terms of just upgrading PeopleSoft, and we received 4 proposals for a new ERP. And what we said was, we're going to look at the winner of each of these 2 lines and then just compare them on total cost of ownership. And the reason for that was because we were currently operating with PeopleSoft, and we had been working with Oracle throughout last summer in terms of identifying potential upgrades. And the conclusion was that it would meet our business requirements, the new upgraded module. But the question is what really would the cost be in terms of doing that upgrade, and how would it look into the future? We really wanted to make sure we weren't making a decision just based on a single implementation. We wanted to understand what would the cost be in terms of upgrades 3 years down the road, and what would be the ongoing maintenance. So the determination was that we would evaluate based on a 5-year total cost of ownership, which was the all-in cost, because that was really the more comprehensive and analytical way to evaluate the different products. After we looked at the proposals that we received, then we invited we invited 3 organizations in to do demos, and included in those demos, we had about 100 MOA employees that participated. Each one of them was asked to individually score that software product to the business requirements. So we had in front of each employee the business requirements line itemed out. They watched the demo, and then they gave that vendor a score so that we, the selection committee, could really understand, do you think that this software is going to meet your business requirements? And what do you think about the implementation partner that that software company has come with? Because the partner is really important. The software at this point, the way the tier 1 software goes, it is really a commodity. They pretty much do similar things, although there are some differentiating factors which I'll go into. But it was really important to understand the implementation partner, because they are really the ones that enable a successful implementation. So there was a lot of focus that was placed on that while we were watching the demos. You know, how is the partner going to perform? What is their experience in terms of implementing? What kind of success factor have they had? And, you know, is their timeline reasonable? I mean, we looked at all of this. Are they viable financially just as a company? We didn't want to get in, start working with somebody who isn't going to be here in 5 years. There were a lot of different factors that were looked at. We saw the demos, they caused questions, we did a lot of follow-up to make sure that we really did understand what we were looking at and what we were selecting. Also, in addition to understanding the business functionality, we really looked at the hardware and the technical infrastructure and architecture that would be associated with this ERP. And it was a differentiating factor between the different organizations. One of the Oracle products really required us to get completely in line with a complete vertical Oracle infrastructure, which would have caused us to have additional costs, because we would have had to have changed some of the back-end operations of our organization to go down that path. We really didn't want to do that, because then Oracle would have a complete monopoly, if you will, in our business, and it really would have eliminated competition, and it really would have minimized our flexibility in terms of moving forward. So we were very thorough in looking at not just the software, but really the long-term view. Did a lot of reference checks. And then, like I said, we looked at the total cost of ownership. Additionally, we were advised all the way through this process by the Gardner Group, which is a global consulting organization. We asked them to give us advice. What should we be looking for? What are the tricks that they might have? How should we really look at the contract? Will you review our contract? We received, changes back from the providers in the contract. They've gone through the contract and given us advice in terms of how to go in and negotiate specific technical aspects of the contract so that we can be totally on top of it and make sure that we're going to get the best value for the city. So this is the process. I just wanted you to understand how inclusive it was. It was set up this way intentionally so that we could really get ownership buy-in from the users. We wanted them to participate because they're the ones that are using it at the end of the day on a day-to-day basis. Although we had 100 people in these demos, there were 10 or 11 of us that were actually cast the votes for who we would select. These are the names of the people that were on the committee. As you can see, it's finance, HR, budget, AWW, MLP, and grants. And I want to add that even though
Save this list, Mr. Drummond. If this goes badly, I don't know who to blame.
I used to have a list from 1999. I don't know who to blame anymore. So I'll thank you, Mr. Flynn.
all right, so let's get into the results. The winner of the first upgrade PeopleSoft RFP was Sierra Solution, and the winner of the new ERP was SAP and Black & Veatch. And then from there, what we did was we entered into final total cost of ownership negotiations with these two organizations. We kind of had them bidding against each other in terms of trying to drive the cost structure down as low as possible. Additionally, we did a lot of negotiations with these organizations independently to get the lowest cost. So the process really worked in that they knew that they had to compete in order to get our business. Black & Veatch was the lowest. They are the organization that we are recommending that we move forward with. SAP, is everybody here familiar with SAP and who that is? Okay, SAP is probably the #1 ERP provider in the world. They are actually headquartered out of Germany. They have 109,000 customers on a global basis. They are a $30+ billion revenue organization. They are very sound. They've been around for a long time. They have a very stable, just continuum in terms of their vision. They're very focused on their own product. They like to internally grow and develop, unlike some other really large organizations where their business model is to acquire and integrate. So they're going out and acquiring all these software programs and integrating it in, and it's just a very different business approach in terms of how you look at your business. The team we liked the SAP business model better, and I'll go into that here in a little bit. But in additionally to liking that better, it also had a lower total cost of ownership over 5 years. Black & Veatch is a global consulting and engineering company. They have been around since 1915. They focus their efforts in the energy, utility, and government areas, which was a really good match with what we're doing here. 90% of their system implementations are in the government area, which was really important to us because we wanted an expert. We really wanted to make sure that they had the expertise to do this. Black & Veatch is also very active here in the state of Alaska. They do a lot of work for the state of Alaska. So we liked that in regard to their reputation and credibility, that they have a presence here and that they have some skin in the game. So if you go to the next page, I'll just quickly go through some of the differentiating factors in our choice for SAP. In addition to them being the lowest total cost of ownership over 5 years, they would have been we really liked them the best. Their software is absolutely fully integrated. And what that means is that if you enter something in accounts payable, subsidiary ledger, it's automatically populated on a real-time basis to your general ledger. That means there's no reconciling between your subsidiary ledgers and your general ledgers. And that's a real plus going forward. It's very leading edge type technology. Their competitor was not really real time. It was batch processing, which means you have to run jobs, and that just takes more time. I mean, we are really looking to have the most efficient system software. Utilities were another reason why we really went with SAP. AWWU clearly wanted SAP. It would be probably the easiest for them in regard to integrating some of their really large critical software like Maximo and project management, Primavera, their Primavera tool. And there are already like built-in interfaces for some of their key solutions, so that was really advantageous to us because it's already there. And, you know, these large programs work really easily with some of their tools. Also, SAP is the global utility software provider throughout the world. And so that was really nice. They have some additional new functionality that is going to be coming up in regard to utilities. So by partnering with them, we have a platform for additional functionality coming into the scope because that's their core competency. There is local SAP support. BP uses SAP, Conoco uses SAP, ACS uses SAP. Pango Media is getting SAP certified so that they will be available as a local resource to support us. Additionally, SAP initiated a partnership, or an alliance, if you will, with UAA to develop SAP training courses as a part of its curriculum for its computer students. And so they took that on. We actually had a telephone call with the professor at UAA to share, so they could share their vision with us so that we could, you know, really ensure that this was going to happen. It will be important for us to be able to know that there will be kids coming out of college with an ERP skill set now that focuses on SAP, so that we can ensure that we've got the right skill set coming into our organization. Additionally, the program at UAA will allow us to continue to send our employees to those classes and programs so that we can keep them trained. And it's just another avenue for training, which is absolutely really important going forward.
Mr. Flynn?
Triggered a memory, Lucinda. About 5 years ago, I hired a guy away from SAP because they were outsourcing their local support to India. What is their local presence providing support versus their outsourced local support?
Well, I suspect that they will continue to use offshoring, is really what it's called, in India. Pango Media is actually an independent IT organization that's located down there in Minnesota. You probably are aware of it. And they are getting certified. They are in regard to SAP solutions so that they would be the support.
They'll be the local contractor providing SAP support with support from their offshore resources.
Exactly. SAP, all the large organizations offshore, that's just the way they do business.
Do we have an idea of the ratio between local support and offshore local support in terms of personnel or person hours, or what's the?
In regard to this particular implementation, or
Well,
in regard to SAP as an organization?
I'm more interested in this implementation and then the ongoing support of it.
The resumes that we received in this proposal were all people that would physically be in Alaska working on this project for us. Now, we received, I don't know, probably 10-15 resumes. To the extent that they may have some of their organization offshore. Well, actually, Black & Veatch doesn't do any offshoring, do they? Do you know?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. SAP might, but remember, when we're hiring an implementer, we're hiring Black & Veatch as the implementer. SAP is the software provider. What they do for their R&D, I don't really care.
Well, neither do I. I'm interested in the people who we involved in this project. How many will we physically get? All of them?
Yes, but their plan is to work 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 1 week remote. So 2 weeks physically in Anchorage and then 1 week remote. And so that's very doable in regard to implementations. So much of what you do on the computer now, you can do it anywhere.
Okay, so those resumes are not people necessarily in Anchorage?
No one lives in Anchorage currently of this organization. Okay, 0. And I think of all the proposals that we received, none of them lived in Anchorage. Anchorage does not have a population base in the business world large enough to support any of these organizations living here. But I will say that in our conversations with them, they are planning to rent apartments, and some of them are planning to relocate here for the 2 years that it would take to develop this project. but not all of them. You know, this isn't their home, and that their proposal was 2 weeks here physically, 1 week remote. That's.
Lucinda? I would just add that Hango Media was the local partner brought into the room in terms of, Hango Media was the local partner brought into the room in terms of this proposal, but we expect that there will be many other local IT service providers, some who are sitting in this room, who will be available to provide additional support. The other point I would just make is that for the University of Alaska program that was discussed, SAP actually has an established global program where they partner with universities. So really they're just bringing UAA into this global program. It's not like a special thing that's being set up for us. It's something that's very,
It's a
very well
strategic
developed.
program.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Alliance United Statewide. Yeah.
Say that one more time?
They have an alliance with universities throughout the United States.
Sure.
Uh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyways, moving on, another reason why we selected SAP is SAP has actually changed their business model in regard to upgrades and patches. And their philosophy now is to do it more frequently, and they call them enhancements. And so, you know, they may be done on an annual basis, and they've made it such that they're not this huge business, this huge process that your organization has to go through. So that was a determining or a differentiating factor, if you will, because every 3 years we're not going to have to spend $2 to $3 million to upgrade the system, which was historically a problem that organizations have had with ERP programs. The blended rate, the hourly blended rate from Black & Veatch was much lower. It was, and you'll see it broke out on the next page, was $118 an hour versus the PeopleSoft hourly rate, which was $169 an hour. And we'll get to that in a minute, but that was one of the key differentiating factors in the total cost of ownership. In regard to just the overall performance of the application, vendor viability, both of those were really strong for SAP and Black & Veatch. Black & Veatch had outstanding references. We called, you know, many of the companies where they've done implementations. They were all very complimentary of that organization. In fact, many of them said, if you can get Luke as your project manager, he's the best. And we do have Luke as our project manager. This guy rocks. I mean, I actually told him, I go, Luke, if you were selling QuickBooks, I'd probably buy it. No, he's just really great. He knows this product inside out. He's been implementing it for 30 years. And he is actually one that plans to move here with his wife, you know, over the period of time that they will be implementing. We're actually, you know, assuming you approve this, going to work with them to try to get government rates on apartments so that we can keep the living costs down as low as possible. So we've got a lot of ideas in terms of how we can manage that to make it comfortable for them and to make them, you know, really like being here while they're here. We believe the SAP vision for the software is actually more stable than its competitors. They don't have some fusion project in mind. I mean, they, like I said, they grow internally, and they don't have this acquisition strategy that we believe makes their software more stable. That's it for this page, unless anyone has any comments. I've addressed pretty much everything else. If we move on to the total cost of ownership, you know, I went on about this. This is different than probably if any of you were here in 1999. Yeah, this is a different way to look at the cost. The actual proposals from the vendors and from SAP was $8.7 million. And so the $8.7 million is what they said, this is what it's going to cost. But what we did was we took it a step further and we said, okay, how much MOA resources are we going to need to do this? What will the upgrades be in year 3 and 4? And what is the ongoing maintenance cost going to be? And by the way, can we get you to lock that in for 5 years so that we don't have to pay an increase every single year? And so we let them know right up front, we're not gonna make our decision about you just coming into the organization, plug and play, hit the road, and then, okay, MOA, you're on your own. We made them really forecast out 5 years, what was this going to cost? And that was the basis for our comparison. So as you see here, the $13.5 million number is much higher than the 8.7, which is in their proposal. And this is because we looked at all of the costs, and then we included the training costs that we would incur as a result of having to do it on an ongoing basis, over 5 years. So we included training for 5 years in this number. It's intended to be absolutely fully loaded. But if you look down below, this is really where the difference comes in regard to what kind of an implementation partner will we have. With SAP, we would be getting 59,701 labor hours at $118 an hour in terms of partnering with us for a successful implementation. Because their hourly rate was so much lower, they're taking less of a margin right now. And the reason is, guess what? It's a tough market for governments. Not many governments are implementing ERPs. They're in deficit situations. So those folks who are focusing on public sector, they really want work. And that was evidenced from the SAP bid. I mean, that's a really, really low hourly rate for this type of work. So we're getting a lot more hours at a lower hourly rate by going this route. If you move on to the next page, when we did our
Mr. Grayjack.
oh, go ahead.
Lucinda, thank you very much for this. Could you expand a little bit on the financing line item?
Yes, actually, we have a slide towards the back on that, and can we go there
Yeah.
in order?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have. In regard to just the cost, I mean, yeah, we're looking at, this is what we expect to spend to have to make this implementation. We also looked at what would be the return on investment for this $13.5 million. And what we did is we looked at our time and motion study. I don't know if you all remember that, fourth quarter, I presented that to you in terms of what does it really cost for us to deliver our finance functions. And what we did was we took that number and we assumed that we would be able to save 10%. And that's a conservative number. Hackett Group says that you could get closer probably to 20%. Oracle and SAP actually indicated probably more close to 20%. But we were really conservative because it's hard to do this. And while we have the expectations that we're going to save this money, I didn't want to overstate the return on investment. These savings do not include any savings associated with AWWU, MLMP, or employee relations, because we did not do the time and motion study, so it was really difficult for us to have that cost. So what I'm saying to you is the 53% is conservative. I think there's probably more opportunity for savings out there, but it is new, it is risky, and I don't want to overstate it. The hardware savings, that's going to be about just under $1 million a year, and so that's less risky than the savings identified above. But then, if we move on to our recommendation in regard to the funding source, as you know, the municipality of Anchorage is expecting to receive an additional $4.9 million this year in state of Alaska revenue sharing as a one-time distribution to the city. And so we are recommending that we use those one-time monies to partially fund the portion of the project that is capital. We would recommend then that the balance of the funding come from the interfund loan with the Fleet Maintenance Department. They are an internal service fund, and they have been, for the last 2 years, they've had fund balance that would be unrestricted, that has averaged $10 million per year. And so we looked at the fund, and did a forecast, and we believe that there still would be some fund balance there that we could tap. And what we would do is we would take out a loan, and then we would pay it back to them once the project was put in place, and give them an additional 10 basis points on that money. And we would pay it back over 10 years, and then we would only borrow it as we need it. Now, what I want to point out is that what we're doing is we're planning and approaching this in 3 phases in regard to the financing. The state of Alaska revenue sharing will most likely not be received until the end of August or early September, okay? If we actually really go down the path of this and start implementation in mid-August, we may have to make an upfront payment for the license fees and the first year maintenance fees, which could approach $1 million. So that would mean we wouldn't actually have the cash in the door from the state of Alaska revenue sharing. So in regard to the interfund loan, and you will see this will be spelled out for you in the AR that you will have on Tuesday night. What we're recommending is to the extent we need the funding prior to receiving any state of Alaska revenue sharing, we would take out a loan, up front to get us through that initial phase, and then use revenue sharing to fund the next portion of the project. When that runs out, then we'll take out another loan against the same fund, and then that would fund the balance. And so that's how we're presenting the phasing of this. We evaluated different options for the financing, but we looked at this and we thought that, like in regard to the interfund loan, here we're paying the interest back to ourselves. We have the money, and the other challenge is that the banks, we could get a master tax-exempt lease loan. The banks will only lend on a payment schedule up to 7 years. And if we do an interfund loan, we can pay it back over 10 years, which I believe to be really much more reflective of the life of this type of a project. So it really better matches the true amortization of the software. Any questions on the financing?
Patrick?
Why wouldn't you just pay off that first $1 million when you do get the state revenue sharing in the door, and then do one loan at the end?
And that would be a great idea.
I think
Yeah.
it saves you 20.
Save interest.
Save 37 cents or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Can't buy a stamp with it, but.
Good suggestion, yeah. Yeah.
Jennifer?
And will the AIM include sort of the long-term viability of the fund? Because I remember at one point this fund was pretty low, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, and it's been stable for the last few years. And, we've talked with Maury over there, Maury Thompson, who's in charge of that fund. He feels comfortable with it. I would say to you, if that fund, does not have the fund balance available, we would look elsewhere. I mean, obviously, we would not cause that to go negative, and I have ideas on where we could go elsewhere. But we would present that to you probably mid to late 2012, which is how far down the road we would be in regard to that. Okay. And the other thing I want to point out too is, we're going to be presenting numbers to you on Tuesday night. And these are numbers that we've been working really, really hard for like 6 months. But we're planning to begin the contract negotiations next week. That's just beginning them to get all the terms and conditions laid out. And then we are going to go into an assessment phase where the first 3 months of the project is just really hardcore drilling into the details, really understanding the gap analysis. It may be that there may be scope differences that come out of both of these processes. So at that point in time, if there are differences and changes, we will come back to you and let you know. But this is, we've worked these numbers really hard. This is the best we have as today, but you just need to know that these kind of projects, they are dynamic and they change. And even though we have a not to exceed in place, that we would have a not to exceed in place with both Black and Beach and SAP, it just happens. That's the way it is. Gardner Group said that we should plan for 20 to 30% contingency on this type of a project. The implementation plan that we are proposing is a plan that would begin, we would begin working with Black and Veatch mid-August. They've proposed a 19-month implementation, so a year and a half. And their proposal indicates that we would implement finance and HR together first, and then the second phase is implementing budget. Unfortunately, the way this plan is laid out, the budget is not a good time to be implementing budget. So that is a good example of something that we will be working on with Black and Veatch once we start in the project, because that would probably cripple our budget group to be implementing the budget system. So it may be that we implement phase one, which is finance HR, we do our budget internally, and when we're done, then they come back and they implement budget. But those would be details that we'll work out as we better understand it. When they first submitted their implementation plan, we were hoping for a start date of June, and so that's the reason why this all got pushed back. In regard to, the next steps, we're doing this today to get you up to speed on the project. We will be introducing the financing AM and AR on Tuesday night because it needs to have a public notice. And then your approval of that would be on July 12th. On that same evening, we will present to you the AM, AR for the contract, which would be with Black and Veatch and SAP. And then, based on your approval, we would begin implementation in mid-August. Any questions?
Well done.
Thank you.
Has any other public ever gone through the negotiating process we went through as far as the bid? Have you ever heard that going on in the state or school district?
No, I will say that we were able to negotiate 80% of retail.
That concludes this meeting. Thank you.